Hello and welcome to this new video. So recently I made a WASD video where I went over the kind of binds and stuff. And I think I needed to explain a couple of things here just because there's a reaction from a popular streamer named Nemesis in which he's going through my video and he's making some pretty pointed criticisms. But I have a couple of things to say about these sort of things. And I wrote down a couple of timestamps. I'm going to try to save a little bit of your time. We're not going to watch the entire thing. We're just going to go through a couple of the things that he says. So I'm going to maybe do theater mode here to enlarge in this, and then we're going to go to 335 to begin with. Now, throughout the video, to be very charitable to him, I can understand how, from a pro player's point of view, or a very highly skilled, better than me, clearly, player's point of view, he wants to think about what's actually optimal, what's maybe the best, what pros like to do. But we're going to go through a couple of those arguments in a moment. So let's start with this one. A lot faster. Ultimately, it's a preference thing, but I will recommend that you become a lower DPI player. For context, this is me talking about like lowering your DPI as a recommendation. Or so, especially with these binds, and just get used to picking up your mouse if you have low mouse pad space, and incorporating the arm a lot more to take the load off your wrist for longevity. So just to summarize what I said there, basically lowering your DPI and making sure that you're moving your mouse with your arm is my recommendation, right? Because doing that instead of moving it with your wrist, one, you can be a little bit more accurate because, well, when you're playing on lower DPI, you don't miss as much. Not that it matters that much when it goes from like 800 to 24. I'm talking about like people that play on like Psycho DPIs like 5,000, right? Probably don't lower it all the way down to 800. If I had to walk that back, I'd say maybe, just a little bit lower. You could still play any DPI as long as it's preference, right? I'm going to repeat that throughout this video. And also for wrist health, okay? So those are my 2 points, accuracy and wrist health. Just for example, this is how much I have to move to get my cursor from one side of the screen to the other.
I think that's really terrible, but okay.
So this is a recurring theme with Nemesis throughout this video. He'll listen to something, and he might not necessarily listen to the entire thing, and then he'll just go, "This is like terrible. This is bad." But let's hear what he has to say.
That is fucking terrible in League of Legends. That's good for a shooter game. That is a horrible DPI for League of Legends.
Why I recommend. So I would agree that it's really good for a shooter game. I'm not so sure that I agree that it's terrible for League of Legends. If I had to make a good argument for his side, it would probably be just because like there are a lot of things that happen on the screen. You might need to flick to it, and in shooter games, you're probably like watching a corner or watching an angle, and you don't have to like flick all the time. So it's better. It's more reasonable to play on lower DPI. While in League of Legends, you might have multiple things coming at you. Totally makes sense. Absolutely, you don't have to play on like super low DPI. I'm talking about like if you can manage it. I should have said this more accurately. If you can manage it, then you should be playing on like the lowest DPI possible, because so long as you're not like sacrificing any speed at which you make this movement, because if you can move your fucking arm really fast, then absolutely do that, right? A lot of pro players will do this in other games, not League of Legends, right? Because League of Legends, people don't really care about doing that. People just play on high DPI, and like they might have like the jitters, their hand might be shaky, and they'll just kind of like boom, like they'll move half an inch and then gone, right? Like, or like even like 1 centimeter and gone. So people might not even think about that, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that pro players aren't doing it because it's not optimal. It's more like pro players might not have even thought about that, and they're already comfortable on their DPI, and they haven't even bothered to try to like make that little trade-off, maybe improve. And this is because if you don't have to move the camera with your mouse, I think he says something here. You can place your cursor where it needs to be at all times in the game accurately with the lower DPI. Now remember at the start of the video where I had you track people with your mouse? I want you to watch I think that's...
There's not a single pro player that I know that plays WASD that's good at the game.
Play clips and... Okay, so I can't think of too many pros. I can only think of one, Stixay. But this argument of people like he can't think of a single pro doing this and therefore it's bad. If that's his argument, like he can't think of a single pro using this setup and therefore it is a bad setup, now that's just not an argument, right? Because you don't know if something is bad because it's been tried and people tried it and then they got off of it, right? Like if every single pro in the world tried WASD binds and said this was not good and then they got off of it, I would accept this argument. But I think it's just a matter of sample size, right? Like I think like literally just we haven't had pros try it. And not because they think it's bad, it's probably because pros might even be aware of this control scheme. It's just they're familiar with the default binds because maybe they've been playing with the default binds for years and years. Let's say, I don't know, 6-7 years. That's a lot of time to like unlearn your muscle memory and stuff, right? Like a lot of people have been telling me this in my video as well, and I agree with them. It's like, yeah, you know what, like if you've been playing with default binds your entire life, you don't even have to bother. Don't try. Like whatever is, honestly, whatever is comfortable for you is optimal. We'll get into this in a moment, the optimal thing. But I don't accept this argument about like pros not playing it, therefore bad. It's the same thing as like pros building certain items, therefore therefore those items are correct. It's like not necessarily. I mean, pros will be better at the game than most people, but does it mean that they're not fallible? I mean, absolutely not. So the way that applies to this is like, dude, it might just be the case that most pros are familiar with certain binds and it works for them, but it could also, and so they're not even going to try. But it could also be the case that like, what if they were comfortable with these binds, but if they started on other binds, it might be better and more attuned to them, right? Some people in my comments, right, a lot of them have been saying, this doesn't work for me. No, all good. And I just go like, oh, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. And other people have been like, dude, it's been improving my camera control. Appreciate that a lot. Like it could push them to a higher potential. I mean, you might be playing at a level of like 100, right? Let's just quantify your skill. You might be playing at like 100 points of skill. But then let's say you swap your binds and you go down to like 20 because you're trash and you don't know how to like move your things. That's totally fine. That's expected. But then over maybe 2-3 years, if you're willing to invest that, you might play at a level of like 150. You never know. I'm not going to say that it's going to 100% improve you. Unfortunately, this is where my other argument comes in. The thing about optimal. Unfortunately for YouTube, the one thing that you have to do, and you would understand this as a creator yourself, you have to word these things in this sort of way. Now, this is nothing. This is not like a defense. This is not an excuse. I'm literally just going to tell you how it works. Basically, I used to title my videos accurately, I guess, in the past, where I used to just say like, "Here's something," blah blah blah, and then caveats, right? But now I realize, like, yo, if I were to title this video correctly, I would say something like, "This is an alternative way of playing League of Legends." But of course, I have to title it "How WASD makes you better at League of Legends." Do I want to word it like that? Do I genuinely believe that? No, I don't actually think that like it'll actually make you better, right? Like I was actually debating this with myself and my girlfriend. Actually, I was thinking about titles, and I was like, should I say how WSD can make you better at League of Legends? I actually posted on the Summoner School Reddit, can make you better instead of will make you better. That wording in particular, because I knew a lot of people would nitpick like oh, this doesn't actually make me better, or you know what I mean? Like, because what I literally mean is it could make you better. It depends on, what your preference is, if you're open-minded to it, that kind of stuff. It's not that it will make you better. So I just want to correct that for you, Nemesis. I understand that that probably frustrated you a lot because you were saying that it was misinformation. Agree. I absolutely agree. Like, it sucks. But unfortunately, when it comes to YouTube, this video did really well. And I think that it's it's because I sensationalized it a little bit. A lot of my language, my tone in the video can come off condescending or mocking. I did that on purpose. It's like it's humor. It can be funny for people who don't care and who aren't sensitive. And so, I thought it'd be funny. I think it would be a nice way of doing a guide. If I were to just do like a straight like neutral faced guide, I don't think it would have been as interesting. It might have been more accurate with information. So sorry for that if you don't appreciate that kind of like style of video. But I hope you understand that this is like a way to cater it to multiple kinds of audience, whether it's like a professional player who might want to think about like, oh, it's something different, or maybe a casual player who's getting into League of Legends and struggles with camera control, or maybe someone just wants to watch something that they might think is funny. And you can think I'm cringe. Yeah, I think a lot of the jokes I make would be cringe, but I'm like, yo, I'm talking to like League of Legends players, like they might laugh at like fucking anything. So that's just a quick explanation on the optimal thing. I completely agree with you that a lot of the times, like, it's not actually optimal. That kind of word, is very, it's a very heavy word. And so I do have to explain it like that. Like, whatever is preference, right? Whatever is comfort for you, unless it's some bullshit like you're binding your Q to Q and you're binding your W to like 7 or something. Unless it's like that, like you can get away with whatever you prefer. Let's go through some of the other timestamps. I had 612 marked down here. But I would just generally.
Yeah, I feel bad anyone watching this. This video is just completely misinformation for every bad player. It's like so fucking sad. Like, it's just a lie meter is a maximum here.
Really recommend a smoother process. Okay. I'm not sure what he means by reason maximum here, but yeah. So like, yeah, this thing I just addressed this actually. The idea of like, I feel bad for any bad player who's watching this video. This is just complete misinformation. This kind of reaction from you, I can understand because you're thinking about it from that kind of perspective, like, oh, like, he's not actually showing you as much. But I didn't really hear any counter arguments to most things. It was mostly just you saying that it was trash or terrible. I promise you that I'd agree with you on like a ridiculous amount of things that you would actually say, but again, we just have to sensationalize these things. I think you get exceptionally mad at one part. Yeah, this part right here.
Black and white.
See, he calls this black and white thinking when I do. Absolutely, absolutely, right? Like I don't go over a ton of different things. I try to get like the main points. I try to use pretty punchy language for this.
View, and it is so fucking wrong again. Like this is just lie meter maximum. This is just assumption.
What's that?
It's just a random assumption with no fucking backup to the claim. It's so stupid.
Well, the thing is, like, if this isn't actually you, if you play on lock screen and you're not actually like a high DPI player and have terrible accuracy, then I don't think you would get offended, right? In a lot of cases, if I put myself into a viewer's position, the only time I ever get offended is if like this is literally true, right? Like getting mad over someone's assumption over me, especially when it's not like exactly pointed towards me, because I would imagine most people watching my video would realize that like the video is not literally made for just you, right? Like it's made in general. I think they would understand that, like, yeah, a lot of this is just to be like super hyperbolic.
It is so stupid. Lie meter is legit on max. There's like show
Because
how high
I try to do the joke here with just like pretty mocking language,
DPI.
where for the first two camera control schemes, I just relentless, just a huge paragraph and like one thing, and then I do like nothing but like green for the WSD. We'll play it through
this game because of the hitboxes that is in the game. Like so wrong. Like just downvote this video. It's just straight up wrong, man.
Which means you'll inevitably. Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to like? I mean, not that it like really matters, but like, are you allowed to tell people to downvote? Or maybe that's Reddit. Maybe that's Reddit that you're not allowed to.
Have some bad inputs, like if you're pushing.
Yeah. So I have to explain this. It's like rooted in half truth, but I was hoping to set up a joke about the skill issue. I think he took it way too seriously with this one.
Green to the right.
Or even worse, you don't even do that because you lock your screen half the time and push it every now.
But you have to move your character to the left.
This doesn't help people improve, man. Give examples of how it should look like.
At the same time. WASD.
I'm trying to give an example here actually where I put the dummies at the edges of the corner, edge of the screen.
You see both camera control as well as cursor placement. Now the only downside is a big one. It's entirely dependent on your skill.
What? That's not true! The downside is you waste 4 keys on your fucking keyboard!
So I went over this during the video where I talked about how a lot of the keys are already kind of wasted, and therefore you could honestly, in my opinion, afford to rebind some of these things, because you're taking away the W from QWER, right? So you could even just like leave your spells on QER, and then you'd have to move your summoners, right? Like ultimately, you have the same amount of like abilities that you had to do before, plus 4, right? Plus the WASD. I understand this, but like there are a lot of buttons that you can actually end up using. Namely, in the video, I mentioned 1 through 6. Like you're not gonna have that many spells. Sorry, you're not that many items. And like the F keys, right? Like I'm able to do this pretty comfortably. And my argument is not that because I can do it, everyone else can. It's more like because I can do it, we can clearly show that like if you try, you can definitely push the limits of your keyboard and your left hand, right? And so that's why I call it a skill issue. One thing he goes over, I think is still in this part.
And you have to use your fingers to move these keys when you could be doing it with mouse and focus on other things with your fucking keys.
So he tries to make a counter argument about taking the load off of your right hand and putting onto the left hand by saying, actually, you should take the load off your left hand and put it onto the right hand. And he doesn't address how having to push the camera and aim at something at the same time, you could argue is the equivalent of having to use abilities and push the camera at the same time. The difference is having your hand move and like push the screen and having a target somewhere else is a different kind of struggle than having to push the camera with your left hand and then moving to like your abilities. And I addressed that actually. I think I addressed that like literally right here.
This is so wrong.
It's a big one.
I'd like to hear how that's wrong. I'd like to hear how loading camera control into your left hand is wrong.
It's entirely dependent.
Also, your camera control is not good in this clip. It's actually worse than if you were to do it with a mouse.
Well, that's because it's an example. I was just trying to show. I was just trying to do like a one-to-one example of like the exact same scenario with 3 different.
On
What?
your skill.
I'm not exact. I'm not sure how my camera control is bad in this
So
video.
your camera control.
I was literally pushing it.
It's entirely
I was literally pushing it
Also,
to
your
each
camera
target.
control is not good.
dependent on your skill. So how do you actually get good at this? Well, it's simple. Make sure your resting posture is on WASD, and whenever you need to use abilities, just move your hand up to 1, 2, 3, 4. Seriously, that's it. Just move your hand back and forth.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, that sounds real efficient, guys.
Okay, so this is one of those times where like he tries to respond before listening to the whole thing. You're gonna listen to what he says here.
How are we gonna use our items and summoner spells and everything fucking else that we have to use? How are we gonna use our trinket? How are we gonna AFK to our teammates, huh?
How are we going to use our items? How are we going to use our summoner spells, our fucking abilities, our trinket, and FK to our teammates?
How are we gonna do any of that with that fucking setup? We can't, because we're incompetent.
We can't because we're incompetent?
WSD and 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to do both at the same time, as long as you are constantly pushing your camera to where it needs to be before the action happens.
So, listen to what I just said there.
We're incompetent.
It's just so ironic that I address exactly what he said after.
Between WSD and 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to do both at the same time, as long as you are constantly pushing your camera.
You don't have to do both at the same time. The screen is really wide. You can move the camera and then get your hand back to 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're incapable of moving your hand like literally just up to the 1, 2, 3, 4, I can understand if it's like unfamiliar, but like in terms of proximity, that's really, really close. So the point is, you don't have to move your camera and your ability and do your abilities at the same time, right? It's just infinitely easier moving your hand up than it is to move like your entire fucking mouse to wherever it needs to be accurately, quickly. Especially when you have to pan in 4 different directions, right? And you have 4 buttons for each direction.
To where it needs to be
Instead.
before the action happens. If for some reason
This is just so wrong, man.
So again, I'd like to know how that's wrong about like I think he heard me say you don't have to use your abilities and move the cam at the same time. I'd like to know how that's wrong. Like, what?
Camera lock is this wrong? Does that make me a bad player? I mean, it's not wrong, but it's not optimal.
Oh, okay. So he corrects himself. He says it's not wrong, but it's, or well, he's talking about the camera scheme, but it's not optimal. I agree with you. It's not optimal. What's optimal is most likely whatever is comfortable for you, as in like the general you. So if you're someone who enjoys playing RTYU and you like being near maybe the center of the keyboard and you like curving it or something, I don't know, and then that's the most comfortable thing for you, and QWR doesn't work for you and you don't like that scheme, then play RTYU, right? Like that's totally fine. Whatever is optimal tends to be, again, I'm going to say like 30th time, whatever is like comfortable for you. Now obviously there are some principles that we have to follow, and I bet we'd agree on these things, Nemesis. I bet we agree that like you probably shouldn't separate your keys too far, right? That way you don't have to like think about that. There's a lot of the mental stack might have to go into like moving your finger way too far. I agree. So as a final thing, I don't understand. I wanted to get out of the PR mode. Okay, well, we'll leave it at the PR response. Okay, thanks for watching. If you're watching this, I'm probably going to be live on stream later. Oh, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. We'll just say it. If you are someone who has a friend, who has anyone around you that like speaks like this or has this kind of immediately like uncharitable attitude to anything, and is just constantly bitter and salty about these things, and I'm guilty of this myself. It's like you gotta be able to call these people out, because if your friends act like this or you act like this, you would hope that someone sits there and goes like, dude, maybe taking it a bit too far, maybe too frustrated with it. And like, again, I can understand, you know, there's a reason for him to be frustrated. He's a pro player, right? And like he to the best of my knowledge, and he just cares about whether or not people are getting good. But you can't care about these things so much to the point where you act like this, because you might actually work against what your goal is. If your goal is to actually help people learn and do these sort of things, then, you know, just like for my video, just like for my title, and, you know, the way I'll talk about these things, sometimes we have to, you know, sacrifice like the sensational nature of it to be accurate. And like, I didn't do that for my video. I went straight for the fuck it, let's go viral, you know, attitude. And sorry, you know, that's it's my job. But when you're on stream or something, right? If you're on stream and you can kind of afford to not have to, let's say, make a video out of everything, you can just sit there, and I bet people would have even appreciated this more, right? If you just do like an actual analysis on this instead of just reacting in a sensational manner. I feel like that would have just been a way better conversation. That would have been more appropriate for this situation, because it's not like you're making a video. It's more like you're making a reaction video to something. So I think you could have afforded to like not be like this. Because if you look at the comments, actually, dude, a lot of people were actually, pointing out like, hey, you were just, you were getting really, really frustrated about these things. It would have been better to make an actual analysis. So that's just my criticism of your video, of your reaction video, Nemesis. I think it would have been a more productive conversation if you just like, you just sat down and like, instead of getting mad about it, right, just like actually walk us through, right, instead of just saying this is wrong, like walk us through exactly why this is wrong. So yeah, even that I did a PR response. Thanks for watching. I'll probably be live on Twitch if you see this, if you made it to the video. Peace. Yeah, and sorry that I made it like 21 minutes. I felt the need to explain.